It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, June 9th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's just riding the wave of these trade rumors, Russ.
Oh, it's a big wave, man.
Lots to talk about on that front. Plus, we will be previewing the Locked On NHL Mock Draft all on today's show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and happy Friday. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you will get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, those trade wins are a blowing, much like the winds from the Canadian wildfires that are covering us in smoke these last several days.
Yeah.
Uh, so after the Provorov trade, getting Cal Peterson as part of the return, that of course made the Carter Hart trade rumors heat up a little bit. We talked about it as increasing the chances of that trade happening. And Elliot Friedman says on his show to maybe cool off those conversations as of now. And he seemed to indicate that, they're still listening on anyone, but that trading Hart is no longer a top priority. Is this just, messaging relationships out there, or what is really going on? Do you
No,
think?
I think that's coming from the club. I think Danny Briere put the word out that the word's out. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you could offer me for Carter Hart right now. And he didn't get anything that would do it. So I think rather than having everybody continue to talk about it and possibly upset Carter Hart, he was like, all right, let's shut the spigot on this because it's probably not happening.
Right. And I think the issue with trading Carter Hart is getting the right return for him, and I'm not sure they can do that right now. It is where my doubts are, is that you look at what Carter Hart is and could be, especially on the right team, and where he is and his contract status with having one more year on his deal. I just think it would be very difficult to get the kind of return that I think the Flyers would demand in this market, and maybe
Oh,
that's just what's happening.
yeah. I mean, there's this hope. The hope is, hey, we're going to get like 2 first-round picks and a prospect. And nobody was going to do that. So then it's like, well, let's talk about swapping in the draft. So, there's this whole San Jose thing. Let's swap the draft pick and, you know, we'll give you, you'll give us something else. And they're probably like, no. Because it's like, in the end, what really hurts those kinds of trades is that Carter Hart's only got 2 years left. And after that, he's probably going to go sign with the Edmonton Oilers or the Calgary Flames, and I think teams probably know that. So the odds of him extending with those teams, not good. So
Right.
that mitigates the value a bit, and that's why you're not getting this super duper return, not because of his ability.
Yeah, I think so too. To me, I think they should be shopping Felix Sandstrom, but I know he's more of a guy that you would trade, as part of a bigger package or at the draft in one of those deals. But to me, you at least start laying the groundwork for trading him right now.
Yeah, I think the vibe on Felix Sandstrom from their perspective is they are trying excuse me, they are trying to just keep me Lehigh all year. Like that's the plan.
Yeah.
Not going to deviate from that.
So that is definitely a possibility as well. The other thing that Elliot Friedman brought up was that Tony DeAngelo is the hot item on the Flyers trade block right now. And Obviously, it would do all of us good to get rid of Tony DeAngelo on this team as an atrocious defenseman right now. There's just nowhere to put him in the lineup really that works, and to have to use a defenseman spot in the lineup just for some power play time just makes no sense, right?
Right. I mean, although teams have done that with some players, Gustafson comes to mind where you use them just on the power play, and if you have to throw them out on a few 5-on-5 shifts, you do it. But that's on a winning team that's got a great defense. You don't do that on a developing team. So yeah, you try and get rid of them. And the problem is, even if you're going to eat $2 million of his salary, the rest still exists that you talked about. That's the problem. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to get a taker for that. Like in the past, you might have just to have a team hit the cap floor, but I don't know if that's happening this time.
Yeah, I have my doubts there, but God bless Danny Briere for trying. I
Yeah, you
absolutely.
give them marks for trying because that's what he has to do. He has to. That's his job is to look at everything. Again, I don't want to doubt what Chuck Fletcher did. Like he said he was doing that. I think he was, but did he maybe take the word no too easily? Yeah, maybe he did. Maybe he got frustrated with that. Instead of saying, but what about maybe this, I'll call you back the next day, kind of stuff. You come up with something else. Like, I think there's a difference. There's more energy there right now.
Yeah, I think so too. So I would not be surprised if they work out a deal for him. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. I think it
Right.
just depends if they hit the right deal at the right time with the right team.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Tyson Foerster was named to the AHL top prospects team, and this is a new thing that the AHL is
Yeah.
doing, which is pretty cool, I think. So they look at skaters who are 22 or younger, and they play a certain amount of games in the AHL and don't play in the NHL very much that season. So it really is truly an AHL level award, and but it looks like guys that are likely going to make it to the NHL at some point. And Dyson Forster is in some really good company in this lineup here with David Jiricek, Simon Nemec, Jesper Wallstedt, and is the goalie on here, Lucas Reichel, and like really like top end players here. And
Yeah.
so I think the fact that he got that recognition at the AHL level this season, and given the kind of experience he got at the NHL level, I think this it's another just notch to say, yeah, I think we've got something good with this kid.
It's kind of like when you're named an All American, they won't have a game, but at least, you've been named to the roster. And that's good.
Yep.
That's a nice thing to have on his record. EP Rinkside will now have to make a new category to put that on there for the prospects. I hope they know that.
The coders are furiously coding.
Yep, yep, because it's something new now. Because they have all that listing at the end.
They do.
That's nice, but that's nice. That's something that I think is really just and it's earned, and that's great. It's great for him.
Yeah, I think so too. Some baffling news out of the sports media draft coverage land. Sportsnet announced yesterday that Chuck Fletcher will be part of their draft day coverage, which, wow, I could not think of a less exciting person just from a media and presentation perspective alone, let alone his draft experience and the kind of drafter he is, like the kind of insight that he would bring to this broadcast. I don't know, man.
Yeah, like we've interviewed Chuck, and he will definitely speak and give you answers. Um, like I don't know, if you're gonna start asking him just softball questions, then fine, you'll get softball answers. But there's things that people would want to ask Chuck that didn't want to do it in the wrong setting, and they're not going to do that. Like we know they're not going to do that. So really, what he's being used for is, hey, you're a former GM. What's it like to get this phone call, or what's it like when this happens? What's it like? And again, great. I'm sure there'll be some reporter somewhere watching so he could give an accounting and write a Flyers article about it. based on his answers, and that's fine. And so that's there's some ratings involved with that, I guess.
Yeah, it's I think it'll be funny. Unfortunately, I don't know if I'll be able to watch it in the States
No,
if there's an international stream available, but I'm looking forward to reports from our Canadian friends on how Chuck Fletcher does on that broadcast. And just one quick thing before we take a break and switch over to talking about the mock draft. One of our mailbag questions from earlier this week was asking about potential free agent signings. Andreas Athanasiou was one of the options presented, and he has signed with the Blackhawks to a 2-year deal with a 4.25 million cap hit, which is almost double of what I would pay for him.
yeah, yeah. There was a time where I thought he had some good promise, and he has good speed. He doesn't finish well. He doesn't play defense. But the Blackhawks are one of those teams, right? They're just desperate
Yeah,
for offense. Uh, Maybe they put him with Bedard because he has speed and he can keep
could
up
be.
pace. Okay, it's a veteran to work with him, but I wouldn't do it.
All right. Well, we are going to preview the Locked On NHL mock draft coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. I look better and feel great wearing Birddogs shorts and pants. They're stretchy fabric, makes me look great, and they're comfier than my other shorts and pants. And I've recently done some traveling, and I wore them in Vegas in 99-degree heat. I wore them on a couple of long plane flights. They really did pass the test. Their cloud knit fabric looks just like khaki but stretches, so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Plus, Bird Dogs use anti-sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you.
You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You'll keep up to date with all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can ask us mailbag questions. You can also email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. Next week, everydayers can look forward to a recap of the NHL Combine, which Russ will be attending. So looking forward to that report as well as more deep dives into what the Flyers could do with that 22nd overall pick that we've now acquired. So, one of the things that we do here at the Locked On NHL channel is a mock draft every year, and it gets more formalized. And I think it's pretty cool what we do amongst all the hosts in the Locked On Podcast Network NHL group here. So basically, what's going to happen a week from Monday, you're going to get little 1-minute videos from the hosts of each show, including ours, with our picks at the different points in the first round of the draft. And had to do a last minute switcheroo because of the Flyers acquiring the 22nd overall pick. And I'm very pleased with my insistence that we redo that pick because it turned out to be a lot of fun. But we won't tell you what it is until it actually comes out. We will, of course, do a bigger deep dive on our show than those 1-minute videos on the whys and the hows and what our logic was in picking those particular players. But I want to talk a little bit about the approach
Mhm.
that we're taking here because I think it's important to set the scene here because obviously we think we're smart and make good picks, and Russ is obviously one of the top prospect experts out there with the credentials to prove it, and so we feel like we know what we're doing here. And so I want to talk about our approach in you know asking the question, how are we making these picks? Is it what we would do or is it what the Flyers would do? So Russ, why don't you talk about a little bit about how we came to that conclusion?
Yeah, we decided it would be what the Flyers would do because, like, when you're doing a mock draft, you are trying to think like that GM of that team and what they might do. I don't grade my mock drafts because you have two missed picks and you can basically rip up the whole mock draft. Or if somebody trades up, somebody trades down, half of your mock draft is done. So it's an entertainment thing. And so, but when we do it on the show, we think we can get pretty close to who might be on the board and what they're doing. So that's what we're guessing at.
Yeah, and I think it was just important for us to get as realistic as possible and, there have been, especially in the past, so we've talked about obviously the Cole Caulfield pick with the Flyers that they did not make, and that would have been obvious to us, and it would have been obvious to us the 2 times Chuck Fletcher had the
Right.
opportunity to make that pick, and he did not. Last year, it was obvious to us that David Jiricek was the right pick to make. He did not, but we knew that Cutter Gauthier was an option, and
Mhm.
we were happy to talk about it when he made that pick. But that's why there's that difference there, right? And so we just want to make it clear that when you see our picks, that's what we think the Flyers would do in that situation. It's not what we would do. So come after us for that reason.
Right. And also, it's in that situation, meaning what did the other locked on host leave us?
Yes. Yep.
See, that's the whole thing. It may not work out like that in real life, but we have to go
Correct.
with what they left us. And based on what they left us, now I have to see who I'm taking.
Yeah, and so there could be a scenario where a guy that you are pretty sure in the real world will be available, you can't pick because somebody above you took them, and maybe made a stretch pick there because it's somebody that they were interested in on another show. And, it could also happen where a guy just doesn't get picked
Right.
for a while that it's confounding as to why other hosts were not focused on him, but maybe they just in all of their draft prep that they've been doing on their shows have keyed in on a particular guy, and so somebody, gets missed in the shuffle and somebody else can benefit from that. And so I think there could be some surprises in the overall mock draft when it
Oh, there'll
comes
be
out.
some surprises.
Yeah, I think there will be. We don't know all of those picks yet,
No.
but we know who at least who we picked at 7. So um, we will be able to share our logic there. Now, in terms of doing a mock draft, picking for everyone, so creating your own mock draft versus just repping a team, like how do you approach that, Russ?
Yeah, so I did one so far on Full Press Hockey, and now we'll be doing one live on Sirius XM against Shane Malloy, and he's already trash talked me today. So I fully plan to win that battle, or at least try to. Based on the fact that he put down he put down the gauntlet. But what I try and do is, again, I'll listen to what's out there because sometimes there's some good tidbits out there, like, hey, this team is doing this with that guy, and they talk to him, and he likes that, and this coach is there, and he knows that coach. You try and connect the dots as much as you can, but then you also have to have a gut feeling about what that organization might need and what that player might do for them, or two or three of them might do for them. And I do stay pretty up on who's in what organization and ranking prospects at least as far as like the top 10 or 15 go. So I feel like, yeah, I have a pretty good handle on what an organization is weak at. And so that's a part of it too. And then the other part of it is the GM at this organization a known guy? Like, do I know his patterns already? Now, we don't know Danny Briere's patterns, but I do think I know Brent Flair's patterns. So,
Right.
because he's been around for a bunch of drafts now between Minnesota and the Flyers. So there are certain things that I have, learned and look at that help me try and, come to a conclusion. But now that this year that Briere is the final say, that could change, right? So there's a wrench in that. And there's some other organizations that have had some turnover and such. And so now you sometimes don't know how they're going to go. And then you have to decide if an organization is willing to take a home run swing, or is this organization really going to try and just get the guys to the NHL and want like as much of a guaranteed pick as they can get in the first round. So those are the challenges.
Yeah, and that's where I think the challenge is for us, right, with the Flyers. This whole
Yep.
Danny Briere being new with Brent Flair being more of an established presence, and we know what his patterns are, right? Because
Right.
we've seen it
Yep.
all these years. But what will the Danny Briere effect be on those decisions? And it's really hard to tell. And so we're just trying to read those tea leaves there and make the best choice possible that we think is the best player available that fits the mold that we think that they would do.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like, again, I think we could always narrow it down to like 3 guys and figure out
Yeah.
the 3 that they're looking at. I feel like we do that on this show pretty well.
Yeah, at least for the 7th overall pick because it's
Yes.
a top 10 and what other teams will do above them is gonna be more predictable. At 22, it's more wide open because
Yeah.
anything could happen at that point.
Yeah, and things may have happened beforehand, and a guy may drop 15 spots, like Angelo Esposito did that one year. So, yes, those kinds of things, when they happen,
Mhm.
then that does really change things.
Yeah, I think about, last year with Shane Wright, um,
Yep.
dropping to 4. I mean, I don't think many people would have guessed that at all, and that just threw everybody's mock draft off,
No,
right?
but I mean, like, that's where I'll give Shane Malloy credit. He mentioned it on the broadcast. I had heard the rumblings, right? But I was hard headed and didn't want to believe it. So I went with still what I thought was going to happen.
Mhm.
And guess what? The rumblings were right. And so that's sometimes where, you have to read that too and see it's not always based on what you believe. And so that's what makes the draft really hard to predict are
Yeah.
things like that.
Agreed. All right. Well, we're going to put you on the spot, Russ, a little
Okay.
bit and talk about your initial mock draft that you did and see if you would make any changes since then and where you put the Flyers at 7. And then
Okay.
we can dig into the 22nd pick overall as well. We're going to do that coming up next. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. My favorite part of the Gametime app is it's great for the notifications with last minute deals and their flash deals. Plus, you can get the view from your seat, which to me is really key. The game time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Also, the tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Russ. So you mentioned your mock draft that you did on Full Press Hockey, which is like your first version of it. We'll put a link to that in the show notes so that you can follow along with the discussion here. For the 7th overall pick on yesterday's show, we did a pretty good deep dive on Ryan Leonard versus Oliver Moore on, if both were available, who would we pick there? And we covered Zach Benson on May 30th on that show. So go back and listen if you hadn't. Looking at those 3, there's a lot of like, is it going to be Leonard versus Moore? Is it going to be Leonard versus Benson? Is it going to be Moore versus Benson? Those kind of choices seem to be heavily predicted at this point. But in your mock draft, Moore was gone
Right.
by the 7th pick. So you think Arizona is going to take him, or do you still think Arizona is going
Well, I
to
mean,
take
I
him?
hear other things, and what I think Arizona might be doing, and this is something that I'm going to find out when I'm at the combine. Uh, Maybe they're really emphasizing and focusing on that entire line,
Mhm.
and trying to see how they all tick. That would make sense to me, actually. Not to say
Yeah,
you would draft Gabe Perreault at 7, but just to learn about the others, right? So, like,
exactly.
so that could be what they're doing is gathering intel. So, um, I chose more for Arizona because I think they're going to lose Clayton Keller in the next year. I think he's going to get traded because he doesn't want to be there unless something really happens where they move to a place he wants to play, or So I think there's a chance of that, and because Moore can play center or wing, like we talked about, that would be good versatility to have in the lineup. But if you lose Keller, you'd be replacing him with Moore with similar speed. So, like, that's you want to keep speed in your pipeline. So I felt like all those things checked out. So then it became a Benson versus Leonard
Right.
discussion. And even though I know people are saying, listen, Danny Briere's a smaller guy, maybe he'll bat for Zach Benson, uh, he hasn't spoken that way. And he hasn't defended any of the smaller players that I've seen or heard or anything. Matter of fact, he has sort of gone along with we want the tougher, scoring type players with speed in this draft, right? So he hasn't shown me that he has an ability to go for a little bit of a smaller guy like a Benson, who's clearly a better offensive player than Leonard, but he's different too. Um, Leonard does have strength. Maybe he's 6 foot now. Maybe that makes him feel better. I had a discussion with Rachel Dory on Off the Post, and she was like, "If that make 2 inches makes you feel better, great." And she has a point.
That is a quote.
Yeah, but you think about it, like in height, we should say in height.
I know.
Um, but you know what I mean? It's like I get what she's saying. I do, but again, the Flyers did focus on the fact that last year's draft had all the players were like 6 foot or over. 6 to 6'2", I think was the average, something like that. And so it's like, based on all of that, I have Leonard picked because he gets to the net, he's fast, he's strong, he plays defense, he plays that kind of way that
Yeah.
they're talking about. So unless they're going to make a big left-hand turn, right now I'm falling for it.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, if any of those three are available, I'm pretty happy with it. But
Oh yeah,
I
there's no
think
reason to not be happy with Leonard. Like there's no.
right, and it's just a matter of who's available at that point in the draft, and again, what the Flyers are thinking. Now, for the 22nd overall pick, again, that's more wide open at this point. But in your mock draft, do you have the Flyers making the same pick as you had Columbus making there?
No, that would change things now. I had Columbus taking Samuel Hanzik, who's a big guy who could score. He's another guy that can get to the net, but he's more of a one-trick pony. He's not a really great all-around player, like defensively and such. Should be a really decent player. He should be, but I don't think they'd take him. So I think
Mhm.
now that would change things. So just kind of like doing this on the fly, um, I probably would insert a defenseman instead. And that's where I probably would put Tom Werlander in there, even though I have him ranked 39th. We know the Flyers don't have a chance to draft him there. So if they
Yeah.
like him, they're going to just take him. And that's fine. I mean, again, there's there's a strategy to be played. Like, hey, maybe Russ is on to something, and Willander goes middle of the second round. Well, guess what? We don't have a middle of the second round pick or any at all. So we have to decide: is he worth it to take here right now? Is this what we're looking for in a player? And I think he would answer those check boxes because he'll get to the NHL. I think he'll play in the top four. My question just is he going to have a lot of offense, or is it just kind of like a little bit of offense? But everything else is there. So I think they're going to look at that and say, yeah, let's go with Willander here because we need to hit on both these picks.
Yeah, I think we absolutely do. That is really interesting about switching up this strategy in terms of even if it's somebody you would normally take in the second round, because that's the pick you have, you take the guy you want.
Right. I mean, you just don't have
Even if
that
that
ability.
right, so even if that turns somebody who's ostensibly a second rounder into a first rounder, sometimes that happens.
Yeah. I mean, I go back to Bruins fans that were really upset because they took Trent Frederick at the bottom of the first round. Well, that's where they had to take him. Guess what? He's in the NHL. He's pretty
He's doing all
bruising.
right.
He's
Yeah.
doing okay. Like we all knew he'd be a fourth liner, but it's okay when you're at the bottom of the first round to take a fourth liner if he's going to play in the NHL and possibly play 150, 200 games. So, sometimes you do make that decision that way.
All right. Well, we'll see what your next mock draft looks like with any of the
You'll
changes
have to
that come.
listen in. It won't be online.
Yeah. Yeah, we will talk about that when it comes to fruition. We're gonna be talking about the Locked On NHL mock draft when that comes out, in 2 weeks, and, getting exciting. We're getting closer and closer to the draft, and, we're getting closer and closer to that milestone mark on YouTube where we're gonna have a giveaway. Pretty sure we're gonna announce that giveaway on Monday's show based on how the numbers are trending, so if you
Awesome.
aren't subscribed over on YouTube, do that now and get us to the 800 mark or even the 900 mark. We'll have a giveaway at every 100 subs
Yep.
up until we hit 1,000. So look for that in future shows as well. On Monday's show, we will have a report from Russ from the combine, get all the dirt that came to the surface there. Plus, we'll have our nemesis of the week. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send us in your questions via Twitter or Instagram at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great weekend, everyone.